And we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Enlightening Tangent podcast. I'm your host, Gautam, aka The Seeker of Wisdom. I'm a manifestation coach, and today we have Mia. Hi, Mia. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming to the podcast. I really appreciate your time. And so, without further ado, let's introduce yourself to the audience, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, so I'm Mia, and I teach early childhood music classes, and I'm also a singer and a mother. And I would consider myself an avid, or I would say an more like an amateur astrologer. I love natural healing remedies, and a huge interest of mine, and which has become like a way of life for me, is learning about manifestation and the law of assumption.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for, sharing all of that. And yeah, so where did astrology began for you? Where did the interest for you started? How did that all began for you?
Well, I first became interested. I mean, I was interested in astrology when I was probably a teenager. Like, I
Right.
loved reading about my zodiac sign, but it wasn't until after I had my second daughter that I really started to deep dive into understanding it. And I studied both
Mm.
Vedic and Western astrology. And I found an astrologer who I studied most of her work. And she did this beautiful thing of combining both of them. So she took both from like both schools of astrology, and she would combine them. And I feel like it made the most sense. And so I would just, anytime in whenever I had free time, I would just study it deeply and really understand that it's so much more than just your sun sign. And
Mm.
um, you can really understand a lot about someone when you know their astrological chart. So it didn't become it. It was before like just like something fun and interesting to read, but then once I really started to study it, I was like, oh, this this can tell you a lot about someone.
Right.
It speaks on their characteristics and also health. So I found it. I just it's like I couldn't get enough um, information. Like I just kept wanting to learn more and more about it.
Awesome.
So,
So yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, so I was gonna say so this was probably nearly 12 years ago. Yeah,
Wow.
that I've
Wow.
been. Mhm.
No, this is awesome. Like I really I'm always fascinated by it. So the person you mentioned, is she like someone like a public figure? Like if someone wants to, read up on her work, or is there anything that the viewers can access, or
Yes, her name is Astro Lada. So Astro, like Astro,
right.
Lada, Lad, like
Awesome.
dog.
Yeah.
A.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
she's on YouTube, and she does have a bunch of courses as well that you
Okay.
can study. But if anyone were to look her up, yeah, Astro Lada, she's great.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely leave the links in the description for our viewers to access as well. So you mentioned you can learn a lot about a person, and like maybe perhaps pertaining to their health, maybe career and attitude, for example. So how relevant is that knowledge on a day-to-day basis? Did you maybe able to were you able to like piece together maybe this family member is so and so, or maybe this colleague of mine is so and so, like how was that practical for you, how did this knowledge like help you in your daily life, if you will?
Yeah, well, I first started with my family. So it's hard, I do have to say, um for for people that are under the age of 18, you can read their chart, but really they're changing so much throughout those years that
Mm.
um I, I mean, you could, if you want to study for children, you can look at their moon sign. That can tell you a lot how they are emotionally. And then their Mercury, whatever sign their Mercury is in, will tell you like how how they perform at school and how their learning style, their communication style. So I did a little bit for my daughters
Mm.
and also my husband's chart, and then for the family members that I knew their birth time, because if you don't have someone's birth time, then it's not so accurate. It You really get the accuracy when you know the exact birth time. Um, and then I also, if I'm working closely with someone, say if I'm uh, teaching for someone and working directly with them, I would like to know um, their birth chart too, because um, just like any sort of relationship, it's still like a business relationship, and there you may have
Mm.
clashes, or you may have you might not understand, oh, I get so why you get along with someone so well. um and so there is compatibility. I like to look for the compatibility, and not to say that if your charts are not compatible then you can't work with that person. I don't want to say that, but
Mhm.
um if you are, then it can make it easier. So I started to, anybody that I was friends with, worked with, and all my family members, I just started asking them their birth details just to see. Um, I just wanted to test it. Like when I found out
Right.
their chart, like did it actually relate to that person? Like, okay, was this true about them? And more I see that it does. A lot of it um
Mm.
makes sense. And on the health aspect, that you can tell, I did notice that for my daughters, because, and also for myself, because all the 12 astrological signs rule different parts of the body. So,
Okay.
and the three most important signs are called your rising or the ascendant.
Mhm.
And that is the sign that the moment you were born, so the time on your birth certificate would be, it's the sign that's in the eastern horizon, and that sets your whole entire chart. So it's a very important, um, well, yeah, your ascendant is incredibly important. And then there's your sun sign, which everyone knows. Um, and then there's your moon sign. So those three signs, if you know which signs all three of those fall in, you can. For I'll give you an example. So
Okay.
my sun sign is in Gemini, and Gemini rules the upper shoulders, the hands, and the forearms, as well as the lungs. So when I was a kid, I had asthma, and then my rising sign is in Taurus, which Taurus rules the bottom part of the jaw and the throat. And when I was a kid, I would get strep throat a lot, a lot. Um, and my daughter has her moon in Taurus, and she got strep throat a lot when she was much younger. Um, so it just, like, once you know like which body parts um, rule, yeah, which sign, then uh, it you understand it more. You're like, oh, the
Right.
sign rules this body part, and so that's when, because there's like, it's called medical astrology.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know a ton about medical astrology, but I do know which parts of the body the signs rule.
Right. So it's like a medical astrology. I assume it's like a whole nother subset of astrology that you can deep dive into if you want to then.
Yes, like if you were to go to a medical astrologer, they would give you certain foods you should eat, exercises, and how to cure certain ailments from, depending on which sign. So it does get, yeah, it's a deeper part of astrology, but and it's like a specialty. So
Right, right, right. Awesome. Yeah, so now that, like, you are very much into like manifesting, and law of assumption, and I mean, like, that's how you and I even met. Like, how has that like impacted your understanding of all these things? Like, did you ever think, well, so and so person might be XYZ way based on their astrological charts, for example? But have you ever had a scenario where part of you just said, well, isn't that a limiting belief maybe? Or have you been ever prompted to maybe perhaps like change your assumptions of things? Like, how did law of assumption factor in? Like, when you first learned it, there might have been certain clashes in terms of like ideologies or teachings wise. So, like, what was your way of like, resolving those?
In general or to astrology?
Yeah, I mean, in general and to astrology, I think like you can take it both ways. I'm interested to know both ways. Yeah.
Okay, so well, first I'll start with astrology since
Sure.
we were just on that. So yeah, so before I learned about the law of assumption, I was all about astrology, and I was like, no, I'm this way because of this planet being in this sign, and this is just the way this is what I am. So
Mm, mm,
I stopped. The thing about that is that it can become very limiting, and it was the
mm,
lecture Pearl of Great Price by Neville Goddard. When I realized that he was an astrologer himself, um,
mm,
and he used to do charts for people, and he left that all when he said you have to sell it all.
mm,
This was actually later. I would say a few years later when I heard that YouTube lecture, and because I when I first heard of the law of assumption, I had a business coach, and she told me to Nevillize the idea, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of this person, Nevillize, and she described it to me as using all five of my senses, and
mm,
like say like if I were to go on a trip, like I would imagine the food I would be eating, what I would be wearing, what I would be smelling, and so on. And um, so that piqued my interest, and I started listening to his lectures on YouTube. This was before I didn't get his books at first. I only started listening um, to his lectures, um, and it was really hard to understand because of what he was saying. I couldn't wrap my head around that we're God. Like it
right.
was, and the reason why I say that is because of my upbringing. Like I was brought up very religiously, so yeah, it was just really hard to understand and like everything that he was saying. And I had heard of the law of attraction, which essentially is the same thing as law of assumption. It's just said in a different way. Um, but I mean, all of these teachers or um, people that talk about manifestation, it's really they're all talking about the same thing, and they're just saying it um, in different ways. And yes, there's different methods along the way.
Mm,
But so I knew of the idea of like imagining something as if it was actually happening, and then it would come. But it didn't. The law of attraction, who I was listening to at the time, it didn't really make sense until I heard Neville Goddard, and his way of teaching really clicked for me. And the
same.
more
Yeah.
the more I listened to him, I started, oh, okay, now I'm understanding. Now I'm understanding.
Mm,
And then I had a mentor. This is a few. So I first heard of Neville when that business coach was like, Nevilleize it. This was back in 2018, and then in 2020, another mentor of mine recommended Power of Awareness. And when I got that book, I feel like that's when it really started. Like not only listening to the lectures, but then when I started reading it, that's when it really started to sink in. And Um, and then I forget which year I heard the Pearl of Great Price lecture, when I heard him talking about how, you have to sell everything, meaning
Mm.
you can't believe in anything else outside,
Right.
not tea leaves, not tarot cards, not even astrology. Because the way I looked at astrology is it is an ancient science. And um, from, for centuries, we as humans have been looking to the skies to tell us, what it is that we need to do. And so I like to now looking at astrology, I don't look at it as limiting, you know,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I like to use it as like all of the positive traits. And I'm not into like, okay, this transit is happening right now, so I can't do this because, most people know what Mercury retrograde is. So I can't buy a technological I can't buy a phone during Mercury retrograde because
Right. Yeah.
I'm because it's essentially is what you believe and will, come true. So if you believe that, um, and also the back to the medical stuff, like I am like, no, I'm in perfect health. I'm not gonna let like, okay, because of this sign is like, I'm gonna have this ailment because, this sign rules this part of my body. So um it's just been like step by step, like a journey. And so now I really don't listen to astrology videos or read about it anymore, um, because if I were to still read about it and know what's going on, um, then I would believe in it. you know, so
Right.
um, so for me, the best thing is to not know what transits are happening in the sky right now, um, and and so I look at only the positive aspects, and then I'm just really I'm solely focused on deep diving in the law of assumption, because I feel like, and Neville Goddard's not the only teacher. I found a lot of value in Florence Scovel Shinn, which she was actually before Neville. Her time she died in 1940, but her years where she was helping people
Mhm.
was in like the 1920s. So, and then there's also Joseph Murphy. I love him too. I think he and Neville, since they had the same teacher, the way I would describe it, at least for me, is Joseph Murphy, um, because I think he was a chemist or a pharmacist before he became a minister, and then went on to the law of assumption. But he's very scientific, and I feel like
Right.
Neville is spiritual, and Neville
Exactly.
really, really like he understood the Bible in a way that I don't think many people at that time did. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I think I heard like he would only read like William Blake, and the Bible. Those were
Right.
like
Right.
the,
Right.
the two books that he took with him. And so, but those three teachers, I feel like I've learned the most from. And of course, there's a lot of modern day teachers that came out. Some in the 70s, a lot in the 90s, that took from the teachers what they learned in the 40s and the 50s, and um, put their own spin on it, because essentially that's what it is. They're they're putting their own interpretation on on the the whole idea of law of assumption. So, um, but yeah, I would say that's been the journey so far.
Awesome. Yeah. So one question, as you were saying, that I wanted to really ask you is like, would you, like recommend, like after knowing the law of assumption and things like that, like would you, ever recommend someone to look into astrology, just for fun, or, is it
Uh,
still to you like worth exploring? Yeah.
um, I would say for fun. I
Right.
would not say the way I studied it.
Okay, okay,
Because
okay.
the reason why is because you'll get it isn't it's very interesting. Like, I would go to
Mhm.
bookstores and I would find, like, all sorts of astrology books, and I would just
Right.
sit there for hours, and I would just keep reading and keep reading and keep reading, or I'd search online articles, that other astrologers wrote, and yeah, because you can it's very interesting. Um,
Right.
so I think that's why I wanted to keep studying it. But I would say that, yeah, for someone to they could study it for fun, but
Mhm.
not take it like not let it like rule their life, if that makes sense.
Right, and essentially, like, deep diving to the extent that you did, like, you can't help but, get to that level, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, because once the way if you're interested in something, then you want to keep studying it and you want to keep
Right,
exploring it. I kept wanting
right.
to um, explore it. So yeah, I wouldn't suggest someone to study it because um, you will limit yourself. You'll find out about what's in your chart, and then it can become self-limiting. And that's what I tell my oldest daughter now, because she's really
Mhm.
interested in astrology, and
Mhm.
I have to tell her, don't say I'm like this because I'm a Sagittarius. Don't say that.
Mm,
You know,
mm, mm.
like
Yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
don't make it like it's not an excuse. Like, you're choosing to believe that you're this way because you're a Sagittarius. So, I said, take all the good qualities, of course, that's fun.
Mhm.
Um, but like it's just not even Joseph Murphy, and a lot of his lectures are also on YouTube, um, and Spotify. He talked about a man reading in his chart that he was going to get in an accident, and sure enough, that's what happened. Because like, if I definitely don't, knowing this information now, like, I definitely would not go see a psychic, because
Mm.
that I feel like could be you could put yourself in danger in that way, if it's like if it's something that you're concerned. I don't know, like, I if a psychic were to tell me, okay, you're going to get in an accident, and um because I do think some people do have like psychic powers, but I don't know. I wouldn't put anybody that's like, um if they're I wouldn't listen to anything negative, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree with you there. But I just really wanted to get your opinion on it because, like, after all that you have learned, like, it was interesting to really get your view on it because I think in the manifesting community, especially like coming from a brown family myself, like, astrology is like a big part of our culture. And
Yes.
like my folks would like, sometimes go from time to time to kind of, talk to an astrologer, and it's so intertwined with our lives that for the younger generation, to an extent, even if like some of us may want to escape from it, it's always at the back end of things. So that's why I really wanted to get your views on it because you have invested, such a long time into that. And I really like the reason that you gave, simply because of the fact that it's limiting. And I agree with you. And I think it's really, to even summarize it further, ignorance is bliss. You can't,
Mhm.
ruin like what you don't know. So you're just going by your life, very streamlined, very focused. So I definitely agree with you there. Yeah, so is there like any interesting, like, bits that you learned in maybe astrology or manifesting that made you go, no, I didn't see life this way, prior to learning these things, but once I learned it, it completely changed my perspective on life. Like, I never saw life the same way ever again. Like, I feel like you might have something. That's why I don't know. I'm just inspired to ask you this question at the moment.
Well, for astrology, I would have to say I've read things that, you can find out some talents that you have,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and when you read about it, okay, I have read some things that, oh, I didn't realize that I'm I am good at this, and this is why I'm doing this. For
Mhm.
instance, um, I part of a career, one of my careers that would be that I could do, and if you're talking astrology, is a teacher. And
Mm. Right, right.
and it's so funny because when I when I was in high school and I really didn't know, well, I knew that I wanted to study music, but I didn't know like well, I wanted to be a singer and all this, but I never saw anything um farther from that. And and it just so happened that I went into teaching not knowing that, so it is, if you look at it from that standpoint, like, okay, these are the careers that could fit, and then I just keep reading that it's like teacher, 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 because
Right.
um yeah, I never thought of myself as a teacher. So that would be like for astrology. That's kind of fun to find out. Like for me, it says teacher, it says singer. Oh, someone that works in the arts. Um,
Mm, mm,
so
mm.
um, and that's actually what's happened. So
Right, yeah.
reading that, I'm like, oh, okay. So that's why I'm saying there is some truth to it, and so
Mhm.
you can use astrology to benefit your life, or add to it. But that's why I say like only the positive stuff and only the fun stuff that you feel like, um, yeah, can make things more interesting or fun. And for the other part of the question for manifestation, I would
Mhm.
say, um, my biggest, I would say my aha moment would be that, um, well, there's a few things. Um, like it's common for people, if they don't know this, to think that everything um, on the outside is just things happening to them, and they don't realize that the inside is where is where all the
Mm.
change is going to have to happen. Like it's not it's the the internal that then you then see on the external, not the other way around. So that was a big thing. Like if I want to change something on the outside, I must change it in the inside, whether it's like, um I don't know, say like someone has an issue with their colleague at work,
Right, right,
and
right.
they're like, I'm so kind to this person, and I don't understand why they're so rude to me. But then inside, they're like, in their mind, they're arguing with that person, or they like, so they're seeing it play out. Um, so yeah, the
Mm.
analogy that they give is like the screen of space, or the movie analogy. I feel like that helps a lot. I'm a very visual person, so,
Right.
and I imagine, when it comes to manifesting, I think my strongest tool is imagining, um, because yeah, my imagination is just so vivid, and it's easy for me to see, um, like to picture a scene in my head, or I don't know. It's very like I daydreamed all the time, like when I
Right,
was
like, no, it's the same for me, so I completely understand where you're coming from here, yeah.
yeah, because you heard it in some of those lectures, like with the Q&A, with Neville
Mhm.
Goddard. Like some people
Mhm,
don't,
mhm.
they can't imagine. So
Right.
I find that so strange, because I'm like, it's so easy for me to I see it like so clearly. And or sometimes I'll dream, like I actually did just have a dream last night, and I was like, wait, I actually thought that dream was real. No, that was a dream. So um I'm sorry, I'm getting off the the path, but um so yeah, the screen of space, like realizing that, um everything is within you, like you have the power, I think is very important to know. Um and that, uh what you truly truly believe, um
Mhm.
is what comes true. So I would say that, like realizing that, like I always tell my daughters, the power is within them. Like
Mm.
not to put, you know idolize things outside of them. You know, no one is better than them. Like we're all equal. Like
Right.
so, and I think that's important for kids to know because
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's it's very easy to idolize someone. And of course you're always, you know, you're always going to look up to someone.
Mm-hmm.
But not you don't they don't have to be on a pedestal, you know. So is
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm saying. And the other thing is realizing I watch my thoughts and I watch my words, and learning how to discipline my mind. Because I think a lot of people they just run on autopilot and they think the same thoughts mostly every single day. And um, when Neville talks about taking action and disciplining your mind, that's what he's talking about. It becomes a practice to like imagine, you know, how you want your life
Mm.
to be. Not necessarily, yes, you'll take inspired action, but sometimes you can be taking action, you know, in your reality, and then nothing is happening because that's not necessarily. It's not always. What I'm trying to say is that people want to put so much effort in the outside and not look inside. And that's why things never change for them.
Right, right, right. That is so well said. Like, thank you so much for sharing like both of those insights. I think, like, really, both of those insights will really help the viewers, even myself included. Because I think, like, it's definitely a reminder to always, focus more on your internal world, especially if you're always wondering, why is this happening to me? Always look on the inside.
Mhm.
And I think like that's really the essence of manifesting. It's all happening within, rather than looking on the outward reality and reacting to that. Otherwise it really becomes a vicious cycle. And I know we are running low on time, so do you have any like closing remarks for the viewers or anything you want to tell, and then we can just wrap it up from there. Yeah.
Closing remarks. Um, I would just say like just to believe in yourself and believe that you have the power to change your life and not wait for anyone else to do it for you because it comes
Mm.
down to you.
Right, right, right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, I think one thing that manifesting has even allowed me to do is take accountability for all that happens in my life.
Yeah.
And no, honestly, that's really a very key part of manifesting. And I'm glad, like, one of the reasons why I love Neville's work, or even any other teachers you mentioned, is simply because of the fact that they always put it on us. And that's such a reassuring feeling, because as much as, like, there are other factors that could be involved, like, for the most part it's always us, it's our own doing. And hearing that, especially at a very pivotal point in my life, yeah, it really helped me a lot to take charge and propel myself forward. So yeah, I'm glad, like, you mentioned that. So, guys, we've come to this end of this video. So, if this video resonated with you, be sure to drop a like and a comment down below. I'll leave all the things that we spoke about today in the description below so that you guys can explore that on your own. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and happy manifesting. Peace.